Good afternoon, good evening, and other times. Whatever time it is for you, I hope you're doing all right. I know I'm doing okay, and this is about the second time I've tried to record this video. It's occurred to me that I'm very rusty when it comes to creating unscripted content. So forgive me if I kind of lose my train of thought sometimes. I'm naturally very ranty, so just bear with me. I'll try and make it an interesting show, so to speak, if you can even call this a show. Does YouTube even count as a show? Like separate YouTube videos that aren't episodic? I don't know. But I wanted to talk today kind of about where I'm at in life. Not as much where I'm at in personal relationships or stuff like that, because nobody, let's be honest, none of you care. I want to reach people who are thinking about going into sports broadcasting. And the reason I say that is because I used to be a sports broadcaster. Many of you don't know this, but my entire career path so far since high school, really, has been to become a play-by-play broadcaster for a professional sports team, specifically for football or baseball. And I kind of want to go through memory lane a little bit because I think it's really important for people who really want to make a creative field their career. You have to be very careful on how you approach that, and you really have to keep in mind what your end goals are, because the path to creating content or being involved in a creative field, like, say, art or music or doing stuff like this on YouTube, it's a lot harder than you think. You are going to face a lot of challenges that you didn't expect. And at the end of the day, when you try to go through the traditional means of getting those secure jobs in your creative field, you're going to find that they just don't pay enough to pay your bills until you reach whatever end goal you're at. Say you want to be an animator. Unless you're becoming like a top of the line Disney or Pixar animator, those kind of mid-range animation gigs probably aren't going to be paying your bills. You know, there was a good video. I forget who it was by, but it was by some goth chick who went the animation route, really wanted to make animation her career, and ended up achieving that. She worked in the profession for a good while. Went to art school. Excuse me, I just have to move the bag that I have back here. But she was talking about how she eventually got to her favorite, or her what would seemingly become the career end goal, or the position that would get her to her career end goal, which was as a 3D animator for a studio. And she talked about how the way the animation industry works, it abuses your passion and love for creating and turns that passion into lots of overtime, unpaid overtime hours, or overtime hours that aren't compensated very fairly, to create a mediocre product, because the animation company wants you to keep churning out more and more content, especially in the streaming age, where I think a lot of studios are really focusing on quantity over quality. And this is kind of something I've noticed in my creative field too. Like I mentioned before, I'm a trained broadcaster. And I don't mean that as a way to dress it up or to sound all important or anything. I'm just saying I've been on this path of becoming a broadcaster since high school. And it all started with doing stuff like this, doing stuff here on YouTube. Some of you who have been around for a long time might remember that this used to be a Let's Play channel that I did with my buddies way back in middle school. And when I started doing those, the excitement I would get for creating a creative project on video games and talking into a microphone and being exciting was what I lived for. And eventually, when I got the opportunity in, gosh, what was it? What year was it? 2018. Excuse me. I've got some ethnic people coming up here in the parking lot with their very loud music in a Dodge. I wonder who they could be. And shoot, now I lost my train of thought. Excuse me. I hope the music isn't picking up on the mic, by the way. But when I was in high school, I was very lucky to have a high school that had a radio station attached to it. And there was a class that you could take to be part of the radio station, have your own show, and essentially have complete creative control over what you wanted to do. As long as you weren't saying slurs or being too controversial politically, you were fine. And I'll always be appreciative of that, because it gave me the opportunity to be a sports play-by-play broadcaster for my local high school teams. So I would get to commentate on my classmates on Friday Night Lights, and I loved it. I loved that work. I loved the excitement and granular detail I could go into on every game. I loved having all the statistics ready and the analysis and all that stuff. And having that instinct to get in front of a microphone and present has kind of been with me ever since. And I've been a bit of a talker ever since middle school and high school because of that. So I followed that career path. I went to college to what I was told was going to be a broadcast production degree. It ended up being a journalism degree with 1 or 2 classes where you actually touched cameras and produced shows. That was only that's a story for a completely different time. I'm sorry, folks. This mic stand, which is just my backpack, is kind of falling apart here. So let me try and get that readjusted for y'all. Hopefully, is that gonna stay? I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna stay. I've got this Craftsman toolkit or toolbox, excuse me, that I'm kind of using to keep my stuff from falling over. Let me see if I can set that up real quick, but we'll keep broadcasting. The show must go on, folks. There's no other way to put it. So let's do this. I might have to edit this out. Is that good? Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay. All right. We'll have to cut that out. Just had to readjust my mic there real quick. But I went to college for this, is essentially what I'm saying. I went to college to go continue my broadcasting career, and I did. I got local gigs at local high schools and in local radio stations to do sports broadcasting for the local high school teams, and I loved that too. It was like a little adventure every week to go see where you were broadcasting next, and I'd have to take my car out, actually the very car I'm in right now, to go out into the middle of nowhere and go do a game at some local high school to go cover an away game. And I really loved it. And then I got to wondering, I always figured that going the traditional radio station route to pursue my career as a broadcaster was always going to be the safer bet. I'm sorry, by the way, that I keep looking away and I keep fiddling with things. This is my first time in this setup here in the back of my car, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to make myself comfortable back here. There we go. That should keep me comfortable for a little while. So sorry for the distraction. But I always figured that going the traditional media route, even though I knew it was dying, I decided that pursuing a more stable paycheck through an established institution was going to be my way to ensure some sort of job security in a creative field where I didn't want to shoot myself every single time I came into work. It was my way of avoiding becoming an accountant. It was my way of trying to avoid some painstakingly boring office job. If I was going to have an office job, I wanted it in a radio station where I could at least be around things that I liked. That was my thought process. And I also figured I had done YouTube on this channel for a while. This channel is several years old, and the first pieces of real content of actual video essays and other videos like that, such as funny edits or montages or whatever, has always been there. And it was always kind of my end goal to have this place be kind of a creative playground where I didn't have to worry about anything anybody else was saying, or nobody was telling me what to say. And I could kind of have this little corner off to myself to build on my own, while I had a more stable paycheck at a radio station that would give me healthcare benefits, that would give me a 401k, that I would have stable income from, so that I could fund the life that I wanted while having something like this on the side. And what I've come to realize now, having worked for about four or five different radio stations at this point, including 2 student radio stations, is that job security and cushy, stable money isn't really there. What I've come to realize is that the money is so low at these stations that you can't really support yourself in most cases solely off of the income that you would be getting from a local radio station. And I'm sure that kind of applies to most traditional media. I've got friends, I obviously graduated with people who are now working in traditional media, who are now working as reporters, who are now working as editors, who are now working as anchors. And most of those jobs are only going to be paying you, let's call it 50-something thousand a year, 60,000 on the high end. And the reality is that in most places in the United States where stations are paying you around that much, it's not enough to pay your bills, or it's just barely enough to pay your bills while you're renting some crappy apartment. Maybe you have 2 or 3 different roommates to help make the rent work. $60,000 a year just doesn't get you as far as you would hope here in the United States in most places. Now, if you moved out to, middle of nowhere North Dakota, maybe $60,000 still gets you pretty far. I currently, with where I moved to go get a job myself, I'm living in South Louisiana, and $60,000 can still get you certain places down here. But the reality is the job that I'm taking, that I have taken, isn't even paying me that. I'm currently working part-time as a board operator because that's all I could get. The best I could get is a part-time position at a prestigious station out of school, despite having, at the time of accepting the job, I already had like 5-6 years of experience, because I had 2 full years of high school. I had 3 years of college, so that's 5 years, and tons of on-air experience. I've worked some of the background stuff as well. I've run the board some at times. I've helped with fundraisers, and I had pretty much everything you could want in my resume for a job in traditional media, and the best I could get was a part-time position. $15 an hour, maybe 20-ish hours a week. Sorry, I'm just double checking if I'm recording. It would be really silly if I was ranting here in the back of my car and I wasn't recording. I'd feel pretty stupid. So why complain about the pay? Why complain about your hours? Well, the reality is that in traditional media, this is how the game is played. You are expected to be working part-time for very little pay. You are supposed to be getting people the coffee. You're supposed to be working the background low-end stuff for years until you finally get your shot on air. At least that's how it is in radio. In TV, depending on what it is, I'm sure it's mostly similar. I know a couple of my classmates did get reporter and anchor roles, but I doubt they pay that much. I really do. You might be getting paid, again, $55,000, $60-ish thousand with some upside, but those jobs are in some of the nicer areas in the country where cost of living is much higher than where I'm at. So it's a lot to give up. It's a lot to have to keep in mind when you want to be a creator and know that it's not going to financially make sense until it does. The growth is not linear, it is exponential. You could be working for years and years and years and years and years and not make your break until you're in your mid-50s. I work with somebody right now who does the sports play-by-play for a pretty big team around here, a pretty big sports team. And he's essentially got my dream job. He has the job that I dreamt about throughout college before I gave up on being a play-by-play broadcaster. And he asked me, when I told him where I was from and I gave him my background, he asked me, well, what are you doing here? What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to have a show one day on the radio, because I didn't tell him this, but one of my biggest influences was Rush Limbaugh when I was younger, and I always loved talk radio and listening to baseball games on the radio, and it's what I've done for years. And he said, oh, well, the longer you spend behind the glass working background stuff, you'll get here in front of the mic eventually. I needed to wait till I was 56 to finally get my break to work for this big professional team that he's working at now. Think about that for a second. This man grinded. Keep in mind, this is a guy who did sports play-by-play. So I want you to imagine this. A sports play-by-play broadcaster. Let's call baseball. Let's say baseball. And I know these figures because I've asked people in the industry, and they know they know what a grind it really is. So for baseball specifically, and it's going to be roughly the same for most other sports, if you stick with a team, a minor league team or a collegiate summer league team or whatever, you're probably going to get paid, if you only stick with them throughout the length of the season, you're going to be paid anywhere between $12,000 and $20,000 for the year, or for the season. Excuse me. For about 5-ish months of work, you're getting $12,000 to $20,000. And when the season's over, you have to find a different team to hop onto. It might not be one in the town that you're currently in. You might have to move somewhere else across the country last minute to go do a different sport. As baseball ends, you might need to be doing football, or you might need to be doing basketball. And by the end of basketball season, you might need to be getting back into baseball or whatever other sport will keep you afloat in a continuous series of gigs that pay garbage just for an outsider's chance to finally make it big. You can't raise a family like that. You can't keep yourself afloat like that. It's a continuous series of gigs, and I'm sure it's like that in most creative fields. Think about comedians. Comedians need to keep hopping around town to town in order to finally create an audience big enough, have enough material, and sharpen their skills enough, frankly, in order to finally catch on with a network or SNL or Comedy Central or whatever it might be, so that they can finally have enough to eat, right? And I'm sure it's like that in other fields too. I'm sure it's like that in animation. I'm sure it's like that in TV. I'm sure it's like that in music. Although I'm sure music with, depending on what music you're doing, like if you're doing jazz, for instance, or orchestra, I'm sure there's a more structured way. Actually, I do know that there is a more structured way because I've got friends who are going that route, to work your way into a conservatory or whatever it might be. So there's exceptions to all of this, but the reason I'm saying all this is because I really do believe in keeping your creative passions not to yourself. I am a big advocate for creative control. I see the creators I like the most keeping their content independent and online for the most part. I think that's where some of the best art and some of the best creative projects are done nowadays. I think traditional media, as somebody who has been in it for a while, I think even sports media just doesn't understand the internet. And they are slowly trying to adjust now that they have finally realized that they're not the biggest game in town anymore. So they're trying to adjust late. They're trying to sign guys like Pat McAfee to big deals. They're trying to put Stephen A. Smith on more YouTube content. And that's only ESPN. And the thing is that I don't think the online space has had a mixed response with that. I think some of those shows still do big numbers online, but the group that consistently watches and consumes traditional media, which nowadays are the baby boomers and the older Gen Xers, the older half of Gen X, once that audience begins to fade away because some of them quite literally are dying off or are going elsewhere for their content, I just don't see how much of a boon having that traditional media backing with the funding and the pedigree is really going to get you. So, did I start this video dedicating it to sports broadcasters? I might have. I know this is a bit of a rambling video, but I just want to say, keep your creative passions online, independent, and try and do things yourself as much as you can, because the brutal reality of this is that traditional media is not going to pay you very well. You're going to have to, the growth is exponential. It is not linear. It's not what you think it's going to be. When you finally break into the industry, once you finally get your foot in, it doesn't mean that you're going to be earning enough to support a family. It doesn't even guarantee that you're going to be able to support yourself and a dog, or even just yourself. There's no guarantee. You could be working until you're 56 for you to finally get your break. Do you want to wait that long? Do you want to wait that long, maybe trying to finally get that huge break, to be dedicating less time to your craft, pushing pencils, getting people coffee, running all the background stuff? Do you want to burn time doing that? Or do you want to go online and actually start practicing your craft yourself while going out and getting a real job and funding the life that you want to live, working something else while keeping your creative passion alive online? That's kind of where I'm at. I gave up on being a play-by-play sports broadcaster a little while ago, but my pipe dream was to stay in radio, because it's all I've really known throughout my working life, and try and make it work. Try and see if I can enjoy the background stuff at a radio station enough to continue to work on it, so that one day when that exponential growth finally starts hitting, I can have enough money to support myself while achieving my dream. And the way it's looking right now, I don't think it's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. And unless you're absurdly talented, very connected, and or talented, unless you have those three things, I'm not saying it's not going to happen for you. I'm just saying it is an uphill battle, and you have to be willing to work your ass off for decades for it to maybe happen. That's all I'm saying. I just want the people out there to consider that as a possibility, and go independent. Start doing stuff on YouTube. Get on YouTube. Get on Rumble if you're a little too edgy and you need to hide from the YouTube censors if that's what you're about. I'm not really that way, but whatever. And if you're doing YouTube content, make your own website. I'm gonna try and learn to make my own website eventually. Host your own stuff. One example of that, I'm not a huge fan of the $1 Million Extreme guys, the MDE guys. I think they make some funny stuff from time to time, but I'm just not, super in that world. But I think that they have created a very interesting model for how independent artists should operate in modern times. They have enough content that can get past big social media censors to where they can upload it to stuff like YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, so that they can get enough of their content out to the masses and have a business model to where the content can feed back into their own personal hosted website behind a paywall, so that they can actually make money for exclusive content off of social media. And I think that that's the path forward for independent content creators. I think I'm trying to think of another example. If you're an animator and you want to create your own shows, create your own website, get a Patreon, create enough of a proof of concept of your skills, and say, hey, I want to fund this. I want to fund this project. I want to fund this show I want to create. I want to fund this movie I want to create. Here's this little snippet of what I want to do. Will you pay me for this? Here's the Patreon. Here's the personal website to go to do that, and re-upload some of that stuff to YouTube so that you can get enough traction on regular social media to where you can actually feed that back into your passion project, and hopefully make enough to pay yourself. I think that's the path forward for independent creatives, and I would encourage as many people do that as possible, because if you create your stuff on traditional media, you got to keep in mind whatever network or station that you're working for is going to own your work. You will most likely not own your work, and you have to play by their rules. And if you don't want to do that, if you want to be able to say what you want to say, how you want to say it, then being independent is the way to go for that kind of stuff. So I think that'll be the end of my rant. Thank you everybody for watching. If you made it this far, I hope and pray that I'm interesting enough that I'm able to get people to, get to the end of these videos. And like I said before, I'm a broadcaster by nature. I used to run a sports show that was, oh gosh, how long was it? I think it was like a 2-hour. Was it a 2-hour show? It might have just been a 1-hour show. But I used to broadcast throughout high school and throughout college all the time. And I want to get back into that practice of doing that and talking into a microphone and now into a camera as much as I can, because this is what I live for. This is what I do. And I'm going to take as many steps as I need to do to do it independently and hopefully make money off of it, because I don't see it happening I don't see myself being able to do this forever at a traditional radio station. So this is how I'm going to sharpen my skills and make sure that I am a good enough broadcaster to where I can do that myself. So I hope y'all enjoyed. Thank y'all so much for listening. If you're waiting for other content, if you're waiting for some of the video essays that I've made on here, those are coming. I've got one in the works. I promise I have not abandoned you. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thank y'all so much for listening, and God bless.